Construction season is here once again with the City of Saskatoon. We have Todd Grabowski with us. Going to shed some light on the happenings around the city right now and what's going to be happening later into the summer, not only on the Circle Drive Northbridge, but other projects around town. Todd, thanks so much for actually coming down to the studio here and giving us a little bit of insight. Talk a little bit about yourself and what is your role with the city?
My name is Todd Grabowski. I'm the engineering manager for the asset preservation section of the city. So what we kind of look at is the long-term planning for the rehabilitation work of a bunch of core infrastructure through the city of Saskatoon. So we look at the water and sewer replacements and rehabilitations, the roadway rehabilitations and replacements of existing infrastructure, and also the bridge projects as well. So that's kind of the big one going on right now is the Circle Drive North Bridge, which has started, I think, record early for us for a bridge project. So that work is just ongoing as we speak right now. So,
what happens when you look at a massive project, really, when you take into consideration the bridge is about 40 years old or so? Do you look at it and say, let's do it all in 1 year, or should we bust it up into 2 seasons and lengthen that pain that we're going through? How do you evaluate that?
So we look at a lot of things. Like ideally, we always want a project to be done in one construction season, but sometimes the work doesn't allow it. But in this situation, if we started early and we looked at some of the designing phase, that we could complete this work in one construction season, so then we went ahead and planned that, and that's part of the reason for this early start. But we've had other projects in the past that couldn't have been done in one construction season, so in that time we have split them up in 2 years. But in some of the feedback received in the past is, it's preferred to always have it be one construction season if we can do it. So, we try to implement any of the feedback received from projects and try to improve on it for moving forward. And then also, one thing about, when you do it over 2 seasons, you're going to have extra time for mow, setup, cleanup, things like that maybe you wouldn't have if you could just stay on the project and get it done. So usually, if you can fit it in 1 season, it'll actually be faster than the time of 2 seasons, because you'd have to set up again, bring crews to site, bring all your equipment and things like that, and that takes a fair amount of time. So that's kind of the preference is 1 season, but sometimes the project doesn't allow it. So
with a bridge as busy as Circle Drive North, do you know what the traffic volume would be? And I mean, it must take a heck of a pounding with heavy trucks and salt and 40 years of that. Do we have an idea what the volume is on that?
Yes, the traffic volume is, I think there's over 80,000 vehicles a day that go over that bridge. I think there's been some peak times where, when University Bridge was done in, I think 2014 time-ish, I think you got up to 100,000 vehicles a day for some of that time when traffic was, so, it's quite heavily used. It's one of the largest trekking, it's our long-haul route for trekking in the city of Saskatoon. So you get a lot of truck traffic on there as well. I think we're in the that 7% traffic on that structure. So kind of with that, one of the key things as we look at is, we do a lot of testing on that structure to know when the best time to do the rehabilitation is. So we want to time it so, we can keep the cost of maintaining and owning these assets as low as possible. And also we try to shorten up the construction window as well, so we don't let it get too bad where it needs even more repairs. This structure in particular is a little unique because, we added lanes on and a barrier, after the fact. So
that's right, yeah.
So half the structure is, from, 1980s, and then we added in like that 2005 time period, 2006, for adding a different lane on. So then we have the barriers that are different life. So that's why part of this work we're only demoing the median barriers, so the older structure side of the barriers, and replacing that with a new one. And that's kind of like the big component of the work, is just getting that barrier off. Normally rehabs without full barrier replacements are a little faster, but when you have that barrier, there's a lot of concrete demolition, a lot of jackhammering and things like that happen. So,
do you look at, I guess, budgeting once you open that up? There could be some surprises, or is that monitored every year so that you can kind of say, well, the life expectancy is 35 and we're into year 40? Do you have some gauges that you can kind of measure?
For sure, there's a ton of gauges. Like a big part of our group's work is like planning for that and kind of like doing condition assessments of that data. So we do condition assessments of all of the inventory throughout the city, and kind of that data that we gather kind of lets us know, what we're looking at, what we think for costing and budgeting. And the bridge program has a very detailed condition assessment program where they, look at see where, how much corrosion is occurring in the deck. They look for where concrete's going to potentially spall, some issues like that. So, with that, we still can get, surprises, but we've done we do a very extensive amount of work to ensure that we don't get any major surprises. But it's construction, you always can miss something, right? So.
Yep. So if you're doing this work and you're analyzing, I guess, over the course of a period of years and months, you must have a schedule, no different than your car needs an oil change so many 1,000 kilometers or miles. Is there a slot that you would say every 7 years we do this, or is it kind of conditional based?
Yeah, so if we're looking at bridges per se, we inspect them internally every year to make sure they're safe. We do maintenance and washing and sealing and some things like that on the structures as well yearly. And then every third year we have an outside source, like, professional qualified inspecting services where they come look at the structure as well for issues and things like that. And then on a 6-year cycle, generally speaking, we do a detailed inspection to see like where the life of the structure is, including like the concrete, if there's rehabilitation needed or corrosion's occurring, and kind of to make sure, a deeper in-depth report that gives us the timing of when we're going to have to rehab and kind of helps develop our long time plan, like 10, 20-year plan for bridges there.
What do you think will happen with our halfway point for the Circle Drive Northbridge? Do we have a kind of a timeline we're looking at and then everything switches?
Yeah, so the construction itself for this project, we're anticipating in that kind of like 8 to 9 months of the construction with the traffic impacts kind of being complete by the end of October. Obviously, we'd always hope that the work gets done earlier, and there's incentives and things like that built in the contract to help move that along. But it's kind of really a good halfway point to see where the time and schedule is going is when we do that flip and that crossover. So when we work and switch on the other structure, that's going to be a good point to know like how we are doing with the schedule. But I will say there, working early in the season, in winter, there's a lot more constraints in working, so it might be a little slower startup than usually the second phase of a project is always faster. So, we just hopefully everything goes smooth, and we've put a lot of work into it, so it should, but that's kind of where we stand with that.
What other projects are happening around the city? Are you at liberty to discuss anything on the paving end of things, or will there be any other major disruptions that we can expect?
We have a very extensive paving program throughout the whole city. With that, we're still doing a significant amount of lane kilometers, I believe. I have this right here. We're going to be resurfacing about 111 lane kilometers, microsurfacing 70 lane kilometers, and patching 66 lane kilometers. So as far as the roadway surfacing program, it's going to be quite extensive throughout the city. One key thing is when we looked at the plans of this, we try to mitigate any impacts from directly related to Circle Drive North project with the timing and how we do any of the paving. So we do know there's going to be some paving on Circle Drive tying into the Northbridge. So we scheduled that work at night, past 8 p.m. so that we can still, make sure we do that paving and it won't really add additional impacts to the project and some of the traffic things that we were seeing. So we've looked around anywhere we think that there's immediate adjacent concerns. We've kind of shifted to night work to mitigate some of the traffic impacts. And then outside the city, we still have a very, very detailed, robust paving plan. And that's kind of how we're moving forward with paving, is we do a significant amount of lane kilometers per year, and we're going to continue on with that. We have a significant amount of water and sewer work going throughout the city as well. A key area where there's going to be some work is downtown. We have some water main replacements, open trench work that's going to be happening downtown. We generally do water main replacements in a block at a time and then kind of keep moving on in segments. So we'll hear a lot more about that as we kind of move to more of the construction season for most of the other projects. So I think we'll start hearing a lot more in April, kind of May time period, of the next kind of phases of construction projects coming out.
I'd imagine there'd have to be some labor planning that would come into play so that we have a lot of summer students perhaps that you can hire that workforce and leapfrog, if you will, to try and manage that added crunch between May and October. Yeah,
like for staffing, like it's a detailed process, right? Like a lot of the planning work happens, for the next seasons, even starting during this construction season, right? So there's the city's kind of separated that we have a delivery group, construction design, which once some of the work's been planned, some goes to them to kind of facilitate the project management side of it. So they'll get the tenders ready, they'll do the inspection services and the project management services as well for those projects. And then a lot of our group is doing the planning and preservation. The main projects we run is just the bridge projects. Other than that, like it's in a different division in the city, but we're a one city approach, so we always work together to make sure that it's moving well. So our group does planning like all year round. So we kind of focus on that.
You just can't do 12 months. I would imagine you'd have to have some forecasting to do some things beyond 2 years.
Yeah. So one of the key things that we kind of develop from our group, there's a 3-year plan map where it's an asset preservation plan for the next 3 years of work that we're anticipating. It just kind of helps forecast and coordinate other city projects to kind of be around what our initial plan is. It's posted on the city website, and anyone can look at it and see if they're curious, if they know their road is going to be in that network. It kind of shows at this time what is our current 3-year plan. So we have that readily available, and it's a document we use. And then we also kind of have longer term plans as well, but with things changing and stuff, we don't really those aren't public because there's a lot of change and variation. So, and it's kind of a moving target, anything past the 3 years. Even 3 years is sometimes hard to manage when,
to hold, sure.
Especially when you could have water main breaks or road conditions that could change in a rapid time. And we always want to be flexible to make sure we're doing the best repair possible and the best location. So
you mentioned that there is an app that people can get as well that would help them navigate.
Yeah, we have a construction map that's available on the city website. So it's a link, and you can click it. It shows you what active construction projects are going on and when detours are present. So a lot of times that'll show, if you look at it in the morning or something like those lines, you'll be able to see, if there's an impact to your route of traffic, or, and if it's going to impact your drive or any other things that you can see. It kind of gives you some insight to what's actually going on in the city. And I know sometimes it's been handy when I looked at it in the morning and said, okay, my route is normally this way. And I said, oh, they're replacing a light pole that day, from 9 to 1. So maybe I'll avoid that if I can. So it gives you a lot of, insight that's available. And it's just on the city website, and anyone can access it. So,
Todd, thanks so much for coming down. Best of luck this construction season. We'll see you in the fall, maybe.
All right. Thank you very much.
That's our show for today. I'd like to thank our guests, Natasha Solveson and Todd Grabowski. I'm your host, Randy Shabila. We'll see you next time on Connect.